on this program, on my radio show, on my appearances on Hannity and other shows on this network, I have been saying for months that all presidents, vice presidents, attorneys general, secretaries of states have taken documents home. And some of them have kept them, and some of them have been classified. And that needs to be looked into. But I guess because I'm not officially a legal analyst, I just have my own show and a constitutional lawyer and a former chief of staff to attorney general, many people didn't pay attention to it. The Department of Justice unleashed a criminal investigation of the former president, President Trump, in ways that have never been done before in American history. They didn't bother to look at Obama's records or Clinton's records or George W. Bush's records. They didn't look at Cheney's records or Gore's records or, of course, then Vice President Biden's records. They didn't look at Bill Barr's records and Eric Holder's records. We know about Hillary Clinton and all the other former secretaries of state and so forth. They didn't put them under oath. None of it. None of it. So apparently none of them have taken any documents, either under the Espionage Act or the Presidential Records Act. I have never believed that. I don't believe it to this day. And so last Sunday, we had as a guest the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and his name is Jamie Comer. And my last question to him last Sunday was this. Go. Let me ask you one final question. The National Archives. I'm hoping that you folks will take a look at how they have applied their rules to past presidents, past secretaries of state, past attorney generals, and so forth, because I don't believe in 2 seconds that no past president or vice president or attorney general or secretary of state doesn't have some document at home or didn't destroy some document. I don't believe it at all. Is that something you'll look into?
Yes. In fact, the National Archives is under our jurisdiction in the Oversight Committee. I sincerely believe, and I don't have the evidence, we're going to look into this, but I sincerely believe that that raid on Mar-a-Lago was triggered by the January 6th committee, just doing a fishing expedition to see if they could find anything, anything they could use against Donald Trump. So that was wrong. Every request we've made to the National Archives, they've referred us to Merrick Garland. And we're going to, again, demand that they give us some answers as to what went on and what actually triggered that raid. And we have evidence where other presidents in both parties had inadvertently taken documents home before, and nothing like that had ever happened previously.
For some reason, this has been lost on most newsrooms. That was Sunday on this program. That was news breaking, although most news organizations, or none that I know of, covered it. What happened the next day, around 6 p.m. Eastern Time? People say, why did this leak about this first batch of documents occur on Monday? Why did it occur when it occurred? Because of that interview. Because in response to my question, Mr. Comer said, we're going to look at the National Archives. We're going to look how past presidents and vice presidents were treated. We're going to dig into this, as well as the Department of Justice and the relationship to January 6th. So this leak occurs. It's a limited leak. It's a planted leak with CBS News, so that this administration could at least make an attempt, could try to get out in front of what they knew was going to be a potential scandal, now that the Republicans controlled the House and Mr. Comer was in charge of that committee. And my last question to him narrowed in, focused in on the National Archives and the disparate treatments presidents receive. There's also something else interesting to remember as all this is being discussed, as it should be. You might recall when Donald Trump said, when he was under attack by these people, that Obama took all these documents and nothing ever happened to him. Do you remember the National Archives decided on its own to respond to Donald Trump? Days after the FBI's search of his Mar-a-Lago home for classified documents, at least some of which reportedly relate to nuclear weapons, that was a lie. Former President Trump attempted to shift attention to former President Barack Obama. Trump's Truth Social posts insinuated that he's being politically targeted and uniquely persecuted, unlike his predecessor. But the National Archives rebutted that in a statement. The National Archives, NARA, saw fit to respond directly about what happened to the 30 million pages of unclassified records. The agency said, quote, "It assumed exclusive legal and physical custody of Obama presidential records when President Barack Obama left office in 2017 in accordance with the Presidential Records Act. NARA moved approximately 30 million pages of unclassified records to a NARA facility in Chicago area where they are maintained exclusively by NARA. Additionally, NARA maintains the classified Obama presidential records in a NARA facility in the Washington, D.C. area. As required by the Presidential Records Act, former President Obama has no control over where and how NARA restores the presidential records of his administration." Now, what's the problem with that? These records that Biden has are Obama administration records. The National Archives lied through its teeth, or hasn't kept track of all the classified material. But it felt it necessary after making a referral against Donald Trump to the Department of Justice. It felt necessary to speak out, to intercede without solicitation, and to say Obama was perfect. Everything he has is under our control. And that's a lie, because in at least 3 locations, Obama records were found. I don't know if they were purloined, accidentally removed, or what. They were found at the Biden Penn Center for God knows what. They were found in the Biden garage in Wilmington, and apparently another room in his house, another document found, which raises a question. We have a timeline now. It's ambiguous, but it's a timeline nonetheless from Merrick Garland. Now, these documents were first discovered by Biden's lawyers, who apparently were just picking through his papers at the Penn Biden whatever it is. But it was 2 days later that NARA OLC contacted the Department of Justice prosecutor, that is the National Archives, saying that office with classified markings were found at the Biden Center. November 9th, FBI began an assessment. November 14th, Garland assigned John Lausch to perform initial investigation, and I might add my own. 4 days later, Garland, absolutely outrageous, triggered the appointment of a special counsel. This guy looks like a real rogue thug to me. December 20, Biden's personal counsel informed Lausch that additional documents, we don't know how many, we don't know the subject, were found at Biden's private home. The FBI got them, more specifically in his garage next to his Corvette. We have January 5th, Lausch briefed Garland on the investigation, advised that a special counsel was warranted, and then Garland waits a full week until he decides to appoint one and announce that to the American people. Prior to that, he doesn't say a word. All this is going on in secret. I might add, January 8th was my interview with Mr. Comer, part of which you heard. January 9th was the leak, I think by the Biden administration to CBS News about the first batch to try and get in front of it. January 12th, Biden's counsel called Lausch and said that an additional document was identified. January 12th. That's 3 times. Now, why didn't the Biden lawyers receive subpoenas? Why didn't the FBI take it upon itself to investigate all of Biden's residences and offices and hangouts or what have you? Why were they relying on the private lawyers for Biden? Doesn't it remind you of the Hillary Clinton situation where they relied on private lawyers? But in Trump's case, they sent in the FBI SWAT. Well, that's because Trump wouldn't turn the documents over. No, they were negotiating. That's the normal way this should be handled. They were negotiating. And they pulled the trigger to criminalize their negotiations with Donald Trump because they were looking to make perhaps a charge or charges of obstruction. That's why. It's a disgrace. They were handling the Biden matter as it's almost a civil or administrative matter, and they were handling, right almost from the get-go, the Trump matter as if it was the crime of the century. Now, that should be obvious to anybody with two brain cells to rub together. We still don't know how many classified documents we're talking about. There has not, to my knowledge, been a national security review. It just seems like in this Biden case, they're not in a hurry. The Biden case, you don't see the urgency. You don't see the leaks. Oh, leaks about documents, yes, that are intended to be self-serving, sort of to take the edge off of it. But the other leaks. Why weren't there subpoenas? Why weren't there warrants? Why was there no? He's cooperating. Ladies and gentlemen, he had these documents for 6 years. Donald Trump had documents for like 9 or 10 months. Joe Biden had been in the Senate, most of his life. He'd been in government his entire life, half a century. He knew these laws backwards and forwards. Donald Trump didn't know these laws backwards and forwards. Donald Trump had documents in the basement locked up in a storage facility. The FBI came and they knew where they were. He didn't have them in his garage next to his car or in some other unsecured place in that regard. The truth is, the Espionage Act was passed originally in 1917 at the pushing and urging of Woodrow Wilson. He used it to prosecute 1,000 people who disagreed with him about World War I. It's a heinous act in many respects, and it covers a lot. It's quite ambiguous. It was never intended to be used against a former president, ever. Because a president, while president, has plenary power. He is the executive branch. He can classify and declassify at will. So you have to make a determination. Well, let's see. Did Donald Trump at noon and 1 second on January 20th, was he with the documents, or right after that? That wasn't the reason for the Espionage Act to be passed. Now, speaking of that, the President of the United States, as I said, as the head of the executive branch, has the power to classify and declassify. The Vice President doesn't have any such power. That's not a defense. That's not even an argument. But notice they went right to 5 alarms when it came to Donald Trump, just like they're trying to do with January 6th. And we know why. And Comer's right, and I believe I was the first or among the first to bring this point out. They went into Mar-a-Lago because of January 6th. They decided to use a Plan B, the documents, when they didn't find anything useful about January 6th. That's why the U.S. Attorney and now the Special Counsel has 2 grand juries investigating each, because they felt there would be an overlap. But this is a disgusting disgrace. And if they're going to throw the book at Trump, they need to throw the book at Biden. The problem is, in my view, you can't indict a sitting president. So what Merrick Garland really should have done last week, he should have pulled back. He should have said, upon reflection, I think we should decriminalize our efforts here, because a president has never been prosecuted, a former president, under the Espionage Act or obstruction related to the Presidential Records Act that doesn't even have a criminal aspect to it. And we were trying to pave new territory. We made a mistake and we shouldn't. So by overreaching, criminalizing the situation with Trump, what they've decided is, well, I guess we have to have a special counsel with Biden. They've made a mess of things because they're a disgrace.
Want to see more Mark Levin? Go to LevinTV.com and subscribe now.